Thanks for joining us. This week, we're going to explore the third output of the splitter, the broadcast and record side. Joining us will be Russ Long and Sal Oliveri. So come with us as we go live from the CTS Learning Lab. Really excited about this week's Learning Lab. Joining us this week will be Sal Oliveri and Russ Long from the recording industry. Hey guys.
Hey Mike.
How you doing this week? Tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Well, I'm Russ Long, longtime engineer. Worked primarily in the studio for first decade or two of my career, and then started doing a lot of live sound along the way, and kind of had those two parallel paths going along for many years. And then as of about 3 years ago, I started doing R&D work for Yamaha as well. So I'm having a hand in developing products that I get to use as well. So it's been a pretty exciting career path.
Very cool. And I've worked with Russ a bunch. He's great at everything you do, bud. Sal Oliveri came here actually to Nashville as a touring musician, which I only did for a few years. My kind of head was always, into studio stuff. And so primarily I'm a record producer and some music for film. And I do quite a bit of artist development as well, which is really helping artists kind of focus on their skills and sound and developing music that really represents them.
So neither of you guys are from Nashville, right? And so what was the first thing, what brought you to Nashville, Russ?
Well, I was a drummer originally in my past life, and came from a small town and was the great young drummer in town or whatever, and came to Nashville and realized I was in a town full of guys who were the great drummer from their town, and I was far from the top when it all panned out. And so my talents weren't near what I thought they were when I came here, but also I started playing drums on some demos, some custom records and stuff, and realized very quickly that the drummer has very little to do with the way the drums sound. I mean, I would play on some little indie record and play big and powerful, and then get a copy of this thing 2 months down the road, and the drums sounded small and anemic, and realized, gee, as the drummer, I really didn't have any control of that, and got very interested in the people who made the drums sound the way they did. And that kind of drew me into the whole behind the scenes engineering thing, which before that had been a total mystery. And while I'd always been a lover of music and I had thought I wanted to play music, I found that I was far more interested in being the guy that shaped it sonically than the guy that actually played the part. And as a musician, if you play on a record, I mean, a lot of times a record is 1 or 2 days of involvement and then you're done. But as an engineer, I could work on a record for a month or 2 months and really, really help sonically shape the way this thing turns out. So having that big, heavy hand in the process of making a record was really attractive to me.
Well, Sal, your story's a little different, right?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up playing piano, and so by college age, started, going to concerts more and thinking, oh, that looks fun. Maybe one day I'll get to do that. But I had no idea how I'd ever, meet those people. They seem like special people up on stage. They must be different humans or something, No,
they are.
Yeah, they are. And anyhow, I met a guy helping him set up his gear, during a concert. I just volunteered. And a couple of years down the road, he recommended me for a gig based in Atlanta, actually. And I auditioned and got the job. And so I toured nationally with this group for a couple of years. And then that guy was kind of calling it quits. And me and 2 of my bandmates moved here to Nashville to play for an artist. And that's actually my first interaction with CTS. Was, you guys were providing sound for that tour.
What year?
Oh man, that's like 94.
Yep. Okay. I was a sophomore in high school.
Yeah, and Carl was mixing. Carl was mixing sound.
Wow.
For that tour. That's where we actually met. So I did that for a few years, and all the while was writing and kind of producing, like, just, I was learning what I was doing at that point. I mean, in Atlanta, I had played and wrote on the record for that band, and it did well and all that stuff, but I was still kind of gathering my skills together. And then I made the transition, got off the road after just a couple of years, and just kind of went just headstrong into production and recording and working with artists.
Yeah. So how did you, okay, so you went from live to the recording side, and then you went from the recording side sort of to the live side. What was that transition, or what really triggered that for you? Was there someone that you met that helped you with that, or what was that?
Well, I think for me it was that I wanted to create something fresh. And so as an instrumentalist in a band, you learn the record that someone else created, and then you're performing it, right? And some of my pals who do this day in, day out, that they live for the performance side of it. And I just wanted to be the guy making the recordings. So for me, it was more just about my inner drive of what, that itch I wanted to scratch, which was well, what if it went this way? Or what if the tempo were just a little different? And so I enjoyed performing quite a bit and getting to see the country and all the fun things that go with touring, and the camaraderie of the band and the artists and the crew was great. But I just wanted to be making the music, So that really was the reason.
Yeah. Why on earth would you ever want to go on the road, Russ?
Well, I think, you spend time making records, and you start to see that some of these records have this magic energy that others don't, and you realize that really when you're capturing a performance in the studio, you're trying to recreate a performance or capture an actual performance, not just go through the motions of playing something perfect or whatever. And I think that a lot of engineers and producers lose the perspective of a live performance. And I have always been attracted to a live performance. And even when I set up in the studio, which we've tracked together many times, and we try to create this energy in the room that makes it feel like somebody's performing together, because the energy you get from that, and even if you go through and replace a lot of the stuff later, that basic energy is there from a live performance. So that connection with the live performance has always been there with me, and I started getting opportunities. I would work in the studio with guys, and they would say, man, I'm playing this writer's night tonight, and they don't ever get it right down there. Any chance you would come down and mix me? You know what I'm trying to do. We've been spending the last several days in the studio together. Why don't you come down and mix me live? And I would go down and mix these live shows for the same guys that I was in the studio with. And I had a blast doing it, and it was just an entirely different thing. And your mix translates, and people like the mix, or you have people come up after a show and say, "Man, great mix," or whatever. And there's a magic in the moment of creating something that can live forever in a memory, but only happens one time. It's just like that great meal you eat that you remember for years, but you'll never experience it again. And that's what a live show is. And it's in some ways it's the same, but it's also exactly the opposite of an album, because an album you work really hard and labor for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you create something that's going to live forever, and people can go back and reference it and listen again. And there's probably a deeper fulfillment in being part of a great record, but there's not the excitement in the same way that you have with a live show. So anyway, I was attracted to both, and somehow I did both for many, many years, and I never stopped working in the studio, but I started mixing live shows on the weekends. And a lot of times it was the same guys I was in the studio with, and I'd be in the studio all week, and then I'd go out on the weekend and mix live shows. And I had a lot of people advise me against that early on. They said, you really got to kind of decide one or the other. But I enjoyed both, so I just, basically, if it was something I wanted to do, I said yes, and whether it was live or the studio. And the way the Nashville tour scene works, the whole weekend warrior concept, to where people are out of town for the weekends, but they are back every week, you could really juggle both lives here. And I saw a lot of great musicians who did the same thing. Jerry McPherson, who was one of the top studio guitar players in town forever, but also went out of town on the weekends and played live shows, and a lot of guys like that. And And I just wanted to do the same thing. I mean, a lot of those rock and roll tours that are based out of LA and these other cities, they pack up and they leave and they're gone for 3 months and then before they're back. So you can't really do that. But the way touring works in Nashville, I was able to do both, and I loved them both.
It sounds pretty similar to like my dad, right? Like at some point, he really just loved being a part of music. He was a saxophone player. He realized he was not a good saxophone player and he was not going to make a career out of it, but he just was drawn to music and he wanted to be a part of it no matter which way he kind of went with that. So recording has become a big part of the live world. Like it is like almost a necessity now on everything. And so how do you deal with any of that? I know you do quite a bit, Russ, and I don't know if you do or not, Sal. And how do you deal with that? And then what are some of the pitfalls of what happens with trying to record a live performance like that?
I have had more experience with an artist saying, I want to do a live recording. It's not so much that they're just on tour and they happen to be recording every night, which I think would really be more advantageous to do it that way, and I'll explain why. A lot of times people say they want to do instead of a studio record, I want to do a live record because I want to save money. And I go, well, first of all, that's a terrible premise because you're probably going to spend more, only because you will probably go back and start replacing things. So now you have the expense of live and studio. But forget that for a minute. They want to capture the energy that Russ talked about, right? That happens in front of an audience. But when there's all this preparation to do this one show that we're going to record, there's so much pressure on it that they tend to lose the spontaneity of just being in front of an audience and having a good time and performing. So it can be done, but often what happens is they end up having to go back and then replace, and they want this perfect, this perfect piece of art. That's not why you, it's different. That's what you can do in a studio, a lot easier. So, I've done those, and they're a lot of work because people want their cake and eat it, and that's really hard to do, okay? To be in front of an audience, to not have a controlled environment like a studio, you could be in an amphitheater, in a theater, in a civic center, wherever you may be. Acoustically, it's not gonna, be to your advantage like a studio would be, right? And so they want this perfect sound and the energy of the audience, but transitions and all this stuff. And it's just, I feel like you can suck the life out of it by trying to script it way too much, right? Do that in the studio. But bands that now they just record every night, like I know Springsteen has done that and lots of artists, they always have a guy capture and multi-track. And you forget about it. I mean, even churches I know do this, right? And so if they're like, hey, we're gonna make a worship record and we're gonna have a worship night. But then the ones that I think have done it very successfully is they just record everything. And then they just look back and say, wow, that was special what happened today. Or that show tonight was really fantastic. Let's pull, Born to Run from tonight, and then the next night, oh, maybe we got Thunder Road, that would be my opinion, is just, record and use what's great, and don't choke the life out of the live performance because you're scripting it too hard.
Yeah. Now you're involved in a lot where that's not an option. It is a one-take piece that we're trying to do, right? So we're going to go out to the Opry and we're going to capture this evening, right? And so what kind of advice do you offer to people that are going out to do that?
Well, first of all, I think you're totally right. The records that I've been involved in, the live records that have turned out the best, are the ones where they've recorded, 10 shows, the last 10 shows of the tour, or they've recorded the entire tour or whatever. And because musicians, there's a lot of pressure if it's like, tomorrow night's the live record. Remember, tomorrow night we're doing the live record, and man, that's a lot of pressure. I mean, there's already pressure on a live show, and to think that I've got to get it right tonight because tonight's the live recording is a lot of pressure. But if you're recording every night, it becomes second nature, and you're not even thinking about it anymore. I think the most important or the best piece of advice I can give somebody who's capturing a show, especially if it is a one-time show, like you said, and there are times where you don't have the option, especially when video's involved, because you can't afford to shoot 20 shows or whatever.
Right,
it's just
right.
the expense is too high. You might be able to do 2 or 3, but you can't do 20 probably, unless you're the Stones or some band with just huge pockets. But the most important thing is to have a redundant backup. system, because if your computer fails or whatever you're recording to doesn't, has a crash during the show, then you're going to lose the whole thing if you don't have some kind of redundancy. And I know because I've put together so many budgets for live recordings, and having a redundant backup adds a good chunk of cost. And immediately when people start looking at budgets, they're like, well, man, we don't really need 2 computers, do we? And it's, no, we do. But the thing is, like, if I'm the engineer on the event and we cut the backup computer, and even if it wasn't my decision, if it was somebody else's decision, it's going to be my fault. They're not going to say, well, I can't say, well, no, it wasn't my decision. I wanted to have a backup, but they didn't want it. No, it's Russ didn't get a backup, so it failed, and we're never going to call him again. So you can't, you've got to have that backup computer. So having some kind of a redundancy is imperative.
Yeah, one of the things that I found frustrating, look, we were not really, we were thrust into this recording side of things, and one of the things that's very strange when we're doing these live recordings one time through is somebody might go, oh wow, like I can't hear my acoustic in that song, and we go, there's a reason for that, it sounds awful, right? And then just to have that, I love the live part, I love where you get to do the one time through, and that's what it was, and there was imperfections and there were errors to it. And as soon as you record it, everybody's got an opinion about how it sounds, and they're not always the same opinion, and it's very difficult to try to figure out which one of those matters the most.
Well, live is interesting too, because there's 2 different types of live. There's broadcast, that's kind of a one-time listen, which is far more forgiving than a live record, because if there's a live record, people are going to listen to this over and over and over, and you really got, and you talk about fixes and stuff like that, that becomes a lot more important if people are going to be listening to this multiple times, especially if they're listening to it with headphones and they're listening to it, in their cars. But if it's a broadcast, chances are they're listening to it on TV. There's probably talking going on between people while they're watching, and it's not a detailed listen, and it's far more forgiving.
Yeah. And I think it's just really important to determine like what the goal is for the recording, right? So if it's a live recording, and here would be good reasons in my opinion, these just off the top of my head, is like, I want people to feel the energy of our live show. That's a good reason, right? And so then the decisions people would make would be to make sure that that's at the forefront. So maybe you have good miking in the room because you want to hear the crowd. And it's not so much about the perfect performance. Not that it would, like they wouldn't care about the performance, but a good solid performance that, motivates the crowd to interact, and that's captured visually and with audio. That makes a lot of sense, because that's why you would want to go to a concert, for that experience, that shared experience. If it's for like sonic perfection, then you're going to just have to take a different approach. You're going to have to like record it multiple times, and maybe if you don't have multiple days, do a couple rehearsal pass-throughs in the afternoon and then the show, and that way you have some like spare parts tracks. Like if the bass player totally forgot what he was doing in the bridge of the 3rd song, you can grab it from the rehearsal and fly it in. I mean, there are techniques, but I think it's really just a matter of knowing what you're trying to accomplish, because sometimes, like I said, the cake and eat it thing is if people are trying to do everything, then meaning they want perfection across the board and they're not prioritizing, you end up doing it all kind of in a mediocre way, right? So if you just say what we're going for is stunning these 3 things, you can do it.
So going into your studios, what kind of vibes are you setting up? Like, how do you make artists feel comfortable? What's that feel like for you inside of your studio?
So it's funny. If you have a dimmer switch on the lights, a comfortable sofa, and a good coffee maker, you can make people comfortable. That's a big thing. It's funny because, we obsess over the gear, and that's so important and everything. But, just it's making people feel at ease, right? It's also creating a space where it's theirs when they walk in the door. Like, my studio is in my home. It's the lowest level of my home, but none of my family's ever down there. You don't hear them, because when an artist walks in, they're about to expose their soul, right, by singing or performing, and it would be like walking into someone's bedroom Like, you know what I mean? You have to give them a space that's totally theirs. It becomes theirs when they walk through the door. And so I just make sure that whatever it is that they need, they have. And I often tell vocalists, listen, or an artist, if you're coming to do vocals, say Wednesday at 2, if you wake up at 10 and you're just not feeling it, call me or text me and say, it's not, I've got a little allergy thing going today. Because it's really all about getting them to like not be thinking about like subconsciously, do I sound good? Is this, is that? You know, I had an argument with somebody. Like, I want them to be as relaxed like they're singing in their shower. So when they come in, they can just do what they do and not be inhibited by anything else, right? So a lot of it's just the interpersonal of like letting them know that I'm not your drill sergeant. I'm really your coach, your fan. I'm cheering you on. I'm going to be helping you do what you do best. I'm not going to like crush you with, you know, these demands. You know, I do push artists, but the whole thing is they need to know that they have a support system, right? And that goes all the way down to like just somewhere comfortable to sit, warm drink. What do you like? I'll have it ready for you. It's all those little things. It's just really, we're in the service industry. That's really what it comes down to, is just taking care of people. And if you take care of them, they're happy and they perform better.
The comfort factor is huge, and you're exactly right. Like, even if you say you give them that option of not coming in, even though they're probably still coming in, just knowing in their head that they had that option puts them at ease and puts them in a different state of mind. It's not like I've got to be there at 2 or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, I'm feeling good. No, this is good or whatever. And we're in the studio every day, so it feels completely natural to us. But even if an artist tours, I mean, even if they're an established artist who's spent a lot of time in the studio, that's still not their most comfortable place. They're probably far more comfortable on the stage because they spend way more time touring than they do recording. So they're a little bit out of their comfort zone, even if they're a very established artist with a lot of records under their belt. So it's really, really important that you go the extra leaps and bounds to make sure that they're in a place that they're completely comfortable, like you said. And that's different for every artist too, so you kind of got to figure that out. And I know for bands, like, I always try to make sure there's good sight lines where people can see each other. And you know, you work with session musicians, a guy can get stuck in a room and in a booth where he's not seeing anybody else, and it's not a problem because the studio is the home for the session musician. But for a touring band, even though they may have recorded several albums, they need to feel comfortable, and hopefully we can recreate the vibe they get when they're in their practice space or where they're on stage, but we can create that vibe in a studio.
I love the thought of Sal hanging a shower curtain in his studio to make someone feel comfortable.
Right. Yeah, that's funny.
So you guys have been doing this for quite some time. What's your favorite project you ever been involved in?
Well, I mean, it's a very old project at this time, but I still have to say I recorded that Sixpence None the Richer record that has Kiss Me and There She Goes on it, and it was just really exciting to me because it was pretty early in my career, and the song was the #1 song in like 11 different countries, and Kiss Me was, and just being able to, I remember driving to studios in the morning and thumbing through stations and trying to see how many different stations I would hear the song on between my home and the studio, and a lot of times I'd hear it on 3 or 4 different stations, you know. And my wife and I went on vacation, and we heard the song in the airport, we heard the song in London, we heard the song in Germany, we heard the song in Austria, and it was just crazy that, and I kept thinking, man, I recorded this in my garage, I recorded this in my garage, and so that was just a really exciting thing to be part of.
That was a massive hit. That was so good. Yeah, that was great. You know, I've had, you know, thank God I've had some success, and hearing myself on the radio was like a thrill. Like the first time, and even just in recent days, I co-produced a song for Pink and Chris Stapleton that did well recently called Love Me Anyway. And I hear myself playing piano, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like the kid who learned in his living room, you know? And while that is thrilling, it's hard for me to say a favorite, but I think I have more favorite moments than I do, you know, like how the song performs is out of my control. and you can never really guess, right? Because there's so many stars that have to align. And is the song promoted? Is there some political thing? Do people like it? Do they not? Will the radio play it, right? There's so many factors. But some of the moments that stand out to me is just like someone you would have never heard of, but this girl, short stories like kind of always overlooked. You know, other people got the attention in her family, in her setting. She comes to record, she saves up her money, she comes and records a few songs with me. Never really had the validation that she could do it. And so she, you know, I coached her through her vocal. And when I kind of put it all together and played it back for her, she sat on my sofa and she just put her head in her hands and cried like a baby because she heard herself the way she always dreamed she could sound. And like, that's it right there. Helping, you know, that doesn't happen every time. You know, the goal is to help people be the best version of themselves, right? That's the goal for me as a producer, I'm sure for Russ as well. You want to draw out what's best about them. But when I see that actually happen, that's why I just love doing this. It's that part of
That's
it.
awesome. You're tearing up hearing him tell this story.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
Yeah, no,
God, what a great story.
It's amazing because like people could always ask me, you know, in Nashville, there's companies and they do like these really famous events and things like that. And I would say for us, that's not our bread and butter. I'm not attaching myself to this artist's name over here. We got to do this conference and there were 500 people there. And those 500 people were praising and worshiping. And we got to be a part of that message and amplifying that. And that always meant more to me than that big name thing we were doing,
Yep.
you know? And so it's always like, I don't know, what's your resume? I don't know, it's not that impressive, but we do work that really matters to me. And I love that.
That's awesome.
So, all right, you guys are older than me. So what are some, you know, give me a funny story from your time in the studio or the live world.
I don't know, life story right off. I got to think for a second.
All right, I got one you brought up earlier, which I know you like this one. So I was playing for a Christian artist back in the day, and he would, in the middle of each concert, kind of do like what we call in the church like an altar call. He would tell a gospel message, you know, and then he would go on and on. I mean, this guy would easily, 30 minutes was like a short version for him. And so everybody's starting to snooze a little bit. And he always wanted me as the keyboard player to stay on stage and play pretty music behind him. So he was going on and on. It was like a Sunday night outdoor amphitheater thing. And he's at about 45 minutes. And I've played every hymn and worship song I know in every key. I just am, you know, improvising. And sometimes, you know, if you're an instrumentalist, sometimes, or even just humming, you'll hum a song and you're like, what is that song? And you can't quite remember till you get to the chorus, right? And so I started playing this beautiful melody, da 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 da. I'm like, what worship song is this? It's so beautiful. And then I get to the chorus and I realize I'm playing Beauty and the Beast. And so I quickly just modulate to something else, you know. And and I didn't think anybody noticed. And afterwards, somebody in the audience comes up to me and goes, "Why were you playing Beauty and the Beast during the altar call?" And I was like, I don't know. I wondered.
Hey, if it improved giving, you go with that, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like studio and road life is full of crazy, funny happenings. But very early on, I did a run of shows with Steve Green, and his regular sound man, his wife was having a baby, so I got called out to do a couple of weeks with him. And there were several little moves I had to make during the show. Well, the big thing was I had to wear a suit for the show. That was part of his deal. Everybody in his group had to wear a suit. And I didn't even own a suit. So I went out and bought a suit for this run of shows. And I'm not used to mixing in a suit. And it was the last show, and I'm trying to do everything perfect. I'm like, this is going to be the perfect night. And he sings, when he sings really high, his voice gets a little edgy. So I would ride the high-end EQ down a little bit when he sang these high notes. And then bam, whatever, the song's going on, he starts to sing a high note. I reach up to adjust the high EQ. My suit jacket catches the reverb fader and pushes it all the way up to the top. And so he gets this harsh high end, and the room fills with this massive reverb right at the same time. And it was my last show, so it was my last chance to get it right. And of course, it was the biggest flub of the entire run, which is not that big of a deal, but it was pretty funny.
Oh my goodness.
And to this day, I've never seen you wear a suit.
Well, that's why.
No, that's not true. Kennedy Center. I believe I saw you wear a suit there.
So,
So looking back on your career, what is like one piece of advice that you would give to yourself just getting started?
I would say a couple things that I sort of wish I knew. I didn't know I could ask more questions when I was young. Like, I didn't come through like Belmont or like a school where they had an internship program. And so I moved here and then later realized, man, people would just go up to like famous producer A and say, hey, can I intern for you? And they would, you know, make coffee and copy charts or whatever, but then they'd get to learn stuff, right? And ask questions. And I just didn't, and the one guy, I won't mention his name, but I was on a tour and I couldn't figure out his Hammond B3 parts. And I met him somewhere at a conference and I said, oh man, I'm playing all your parts. And the one guy I asked gave me like a crabber, I got out of here, kid, kind of thing, you know. So that shut me down. But I wish I had just asked more. I mean, I would say throughout my career, I've done a lot of kind of asking. I mean, I'm always asking my peers, you know, all the time. Russ and I text sometimes, and it's like, hey, what do you think about such and such? But I didn't know I could do that sooner. I think I was just a little insecure about it. So that would be one. And then the other thing I would say is to just trust my gut and like go with the ideas that inspired me. Right? Like, I think I was just young and looking for validation. So then I would try and do a little bit more center, you know, music or things that were accepted. But really, people that have success in this business tend to take risks, you know, in all different kind of creative ways. And it's important, I think, to keep one ear on what's charting or what's working or what's trending, but the other ear to your kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of weird, like your inner voice, you know, whatever it is that is your spark that helps you just the way you want to make art. I think it's important to not lose that by just trying to like make a living.
And if you follow the trend too much, then you're behind because that was when they made the record was 6 months earlier or whatever. And you spend too much time doing that. No, that's right. Follow your heart. That's great advice. I would have told myself, if I would have been able to talk to myself in 1995 or whatever, I wish I had done a better job. I wish I had kept a journal, even if I just wrote a half a page every day or a few sentences. I wish I remembered more details of so many of the experiences I had. I mean, the first time I ever recorded saxophone was Jim Horn, you know, one of the members of the Memphis Horns who played with everybody, or the first time I ever recorded harmonica was Delbert McClinton, but that's all I remember. I don't remember the details of it or what it was like meeting them, and I wish I had written a few sentences about just all these people I met and got to work with over the years, and I've forgotten so much of it, and I wish I had better documented all the fulfilling things I've got to be part of.
Well, guys, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy days.
It's over already?
I would do this every month. This was a lot of fun. This was like, we do this for a living and we get to do this as our jobs, and I feel blessed.
That was fun.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was really good.
It's not even 10 o'clock yet.
No.
Man, I love talking shop with friends. It's fun.
Big thanks to Russ Long and Sal Oliveri for coming in and talking with us about live, recording, broadcast, and studio work. Follow us on social media and tune in next time where we'll be live from the CTS Learning Lab.